Chris bought a house at 31. He did everything the right way. Saved for 3 years, put 20% down, got a fixed-rate mortgage. His parents called it the smartest thing he'd ever done. His coworkers congratulated him at the office. He posted the key photo on Instagram, 47 likes. 3 years later, Chris is underwater. Not because the market crashed, not because he lost his job, but because of 6 numbers on a spreadsheet he never ran before he signed. His college roommate Kevin? Still renting. No mortgage, no property tax bill, no emergency repair fund. And Kevin's net worth is $31,000 higher than Chris's right now. Same city, same income, same starting point. One of them made the smarter financial decision. And by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly which one, and more importantly, why. Let's be clear about something up front. This video is not going to tell you renting is always better, and it's not going to tell you buying is always better. What it's going to do is show you the actual math, the full picture, that most people never see before making the single biggest financial decision of their lives. Because here's the problem. The home ownership conversation in America is almost entirely emotional. Your parents tell you renting is throwing money away. Your realtor tells you now is always the right time to buy. The bank approves you for $400,000, and suddenly that number feels like permission. Nobody sits you down with a calculator. So today, we're going to be that calculator. We're going to follow Chris and Kevin over 10 years. Same income, same city, same budget, different choices. And we're going to run every number: mortgage interest, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, appreciation, rent increases, investment returns, all of it. Because the decision you make on this one question will either build your wealth quietly in the background for the next 30 years or silently drain it. And the difference between those two outcomes isn't luck, it's math. Here are the ground rules. Chris and Kevin both earn $72,000 a year. They both live in a mid-size American city, think Charlotte, Columbus, or Nashville. They both have $50,000 saved, and they're both looking at the same type of place, a 3-bedroom home in a decent neighborhood, about 1,400 square feet. The home is listed at $320,000. Chris buys it. He puts $50,000 down, just under 16%, which means he also has to pay PMI, private mortgage insurance, until he hits 20% equity. His 30-year fixed mortgage rate is 6.8%. His monthly principal and interest payment comes out to $1,812.
Add property taxes at roughly $267 per month, homeowner's insurance at $140 per month, and PMI at about $95 per month until his equity crosses the threshold. Chris's total monthly housing cost out the gate, $2,314. Kevin rents a comparable place for $1,650 a month. He takes his $50,000 and puts it into a low-cost S&P 500 index fund. He also invests the $664 monthly difference between his rent and what Chris pays. On day one, Kevin looks like he's winning easily. But this story doesn't end on day one. Here's where most home buying comparisons get dishonest. They compare the mortgage payment to the rent payment and call it a day. That's not a comparison. That's a brochure. The real cost of owning a home has 5 layers most buyers never fully account for. Chris paid roughly $9,500 to close on his home. Origination fees, title insurance, appraisal, prepaid taxes, attorney fees. That money is gone before he uncacks a single box. Kevin paid nothing to move in. The industry standard is 1% to 2% of a home's value per year just to keep it from deteriorating. On a $320,000 home, that's $3,200 to $6,400 annually. Some years it's a $200 faucet fix. Other years it's a $7,800 HVAC replacement that lands in October with 0 warning. Chris has to budget for this. Kevin calls the landlord. In the first year of Chris's mortgage at 6.8%, nearly 80% of every payment goes straight to the bank as interest, not equity. He pays $24,000 in mortgage payments in year 1. Only about $5,500 of that actually reduces what he owes. The other $18,500 disappears, just like rent, except nobody calls it that. Because Chris put less than 20% down, he pays an extra $95 per month, roughly $1,140 per year, for insurance that protects the bank, not him. He'll pay this for about 4 years before his equity crosses the threshold. Chris locked $50,000 into a down payment. That money isn't working for him anymore. At 8% annual returns in the market, that $50,000 would have grown to roughly $74,000 in 5 years without him touching it. That's $24,000 in growth he gave up to make a down payment. Add it all up through year 3, and Chris has spent nearly $118,000 on housing, mortgage payments, taxes, insurance, PMI, maintenance, and closing costs. His equity built through principal payments? about $12,000. Kevin has spent $59,400 on rent, but his $50,000 investment has grown to approximately $63,000, and he's been investing the monthly difference, adding another $23,000 to his portfolio. Through year 3, Kevin is ahead by a significant margin, and he hasn't fixed a single leaking pipe. But here's where it starts to get complicated, because something shifts around year 4, and most people who rent never see it coming. Rent goes up. Kevin's landlord raises his rent 4% in year 2, then 3.5% in year 3, then another 4% in year 4. These increases feel manageable in isolation. We're talking $60 here, $75 there. But compounded over time, Kevin's $1,650 rent becomes $1,980 by year 5. It'll hit $2,300 by year 9. Chris's mortgage payment? Still $1,812. It hasn't moved. It won't move for 27 more years. This is the mechanism that almost nobody talks about when debating renting versus buying. A fixed-rate mortgage is one of the only major expenses in your life that inflation actually makes cheaper over time. In real terms, adjusted for purchasing power, Chris's $1,812 payment in year 15 is worth significantly less than it was on day 1. The dollar amount stays the same. The burden shrinks. Kevin's rent does the exact opposite. Starts affordable, gets heavier every single year. And here's the second shift that happens around year 5. Home appreciation. Historically, U.S. home values have grown at roughly 3% to 4% per year on average. At 3.5% annual appreciation, Chris's $320,000 home is worth approximately $380,000 by the end of year 5. His mortgage balance has dropped to around $292,000. That puts his equity at roughly $88,000, built from a $50,000 down payment. This is leverage in action. Chris controls a $380,000 asset with $50,000. He's earning appreciation on the full value, not just his down payment. That multiplier effect is the single biggest wealth-building advantage homeownership offers that renting simply cannot replicate. Kevin's portfolio? At 8% average annual returns with consistent monthly contributions, his total invested assets are now approximately $142,000. Solid, real. But he earned those returns only on the money he put in. There's no leverage multiplier. The scoreboard is tightening fast. Let's fast forward to the end of year 10 and run the full numbers. Chris has paid approximately $310,000 in total housing costs, mortgage payments, taxes, insurance, PMI, maintenance, and that initial closing cost. His home is now worth roughly $451,000. His mortgage balance is down to about $278,000. That gives him $173,000 in equity. Kevin has paid approximately $218,000 in rent over 10 years, accounting for the annual increases. His investment portfolio, with his initial $50,000 plus consistent monthly contributions at 8% annual returns, sits at approximately $198,000. When you net it out, what each person spent versus what they own, Kevin is slightly ahead in liquid net worth. But Chris owns a hard asset that continues to appreciate, has a locked monthly payment that gets cheaper in real terms every year, and is 10 years closer to owning his home outright.
From year 10 forward, the math accelerates dramatically in Chris's favor. His rent-free finish line is visible. Kevin's rent keeps climbing with no end date in sight. Now, here's where I give renting a fair hearing, because there are specific situations where the math genuinely favors Kevin's path. If you're staying in a city for less than 5 years, buying almost always loses. Closing costs on the way in, agent commissions on the way out, typically 5% to 6% of the sale price, and minimal equity built in early mortgage years means you'll likely lose money compared to renting. The break-even point for most purchases in most U.S. cities is 5 to 7 years minimum. If you're in a high price-to-rent ratio market, Manhattan, San Francisco, parts of LA, or Miami, the numbers can be so distorted that renting and investing makes more financial sense even over the long run. And if you're the rare person who actually takes every dollar saved by renting and consistently invests it without touching it, the returns can close the gap significantly. The problem is most people don't do this. The savings get absorbed into a nicer car, more dining out, a vacation. Lifestyle creep quietly eats the investment advantage. Renting as a deliberate strategy with disciplined investing behind it is smart. Renting as a default you never question, while inflation quietly erodes your purchasing power and your landlord builds equity on your payments,
is expensive. So how do you actually decide? Here's the framework. 4 questions. Answer them honestly before you sign anything. Question 1. Are you staying for at least 5 to 7 years? If the answer is no, rent. The transaction costs of buying and selling will almost certainly wipe out any equity gains in a short window. Question 2. What is the price-to-rent ratio in your market? Divide the home price by the annual rent for a comparable property. If the number is above 20, renting and investing the difference is likely the stronger financial move. Below 15, buying typically wins. Between 15 and 20, it depends on your specific situation. Question 3. Can you actually afford the total cost? Not just the mortgage. Add up property taxes, insurance, PMI if applicable, and 1.5% of the home's value for annual maintenance. If that total exceeds 30% of your gross monthly income, you are house poor before you move in. Question 4. Will you invest the difference if you rent? Be brutally honest. If the answer is no, if that money will gradually disappear into lifestyle spending, buying a home may actually be the better wealth-building choice for you because it forces savings through equity. Chris and Kevin both made defensible choices. Chris wasn't reckless, Kevin wasn't lazy. They just made decisions based on what everyone around them said, not what a calculator said. The home ownership debate in America isn't really about renting versus buying. It's about understanding what you're actually paying for, what you're actually building, and what the numbers look like not in month 1, but in year 5, year 10, and year 30. Run the math before you run to the realtor, because the biggest financial decision of your life deserves more than a feeling. It deserves a spreadsheet. If this video gave you a number you hadn't seen before, hit subscribe. Every week we run the math that the financial industry hopes you never bother to do. And I'm not a financial advisor. Everything in this video is for educational purposes only. Your situation is specific. Run your own numbers.